Okay, so is everyone refreshed from their lunch? Yep, fantastic to hear. Cool, our next speaker is an activist and author/blogger who I first met on the streets of London during the Million Mask March. He founded the website liberatemankind.com, where he details the inspiring and progressive philosophy of the Venus Project and many, many other socially conscious avenues of study and pop culture. He's also spoken at Speaker's Corner about the vast social problems that ail us all, in addition to promoting solutions to move us forward. Here to give a talk entitled Getting the Message Across, please give a warm welcome to Eric.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for coming. I once saw, presumably many of you will know Deepak Chopra, I once saw him in an interview say that the only real way to bring about change in this world would be to spike the water supply with psilocybin and get everybody tripping. He was kidding, of course, but there is truth in what he's saying. Because what we are actually seeking to do when we're communicating these ideas to people, what we are actually seeking to do is to bring about a complete transformation in the collective human consciousness. Now, this transformation is already taking place, as evidenced by the millions of people all over the world who are waking up, starting to live different kinds of lifestyles, start forming movements, starting new communities, all of that kind of thing. And indeed, all of the discord and all of the ridiculousness that we see in the world right now are merely symptoms of this transformation in consciousness taking place. The question is, of course, can we accomplish this transformation without the death of all or most of the people on this planet and without destroying the biosphere so that we can no longer inhabit it? So to bring about change, we have to start reaching out. It's all very well sitting amongst here, talking amongst ourselves. We're already of like mind. We are already here, right? We're already on board. We've already woken up. So really, if we are to bring about peaceful, lasting change in this world, we have to reach out to the people who are not here today. The millions and millions and millions of people out there who have little or no idea of what a truly precarious situation our society is in, so that they are on board looking for solutions to the same problems. More minds working on the same problem is better, obviously. Now, this is not easy, but I take heart from the fact that it has been done before. Many of you will be familiar with this quote. This is a very, very famous quote. Yeah, that a small group of active citizens can indeed bring about global change, and that is what we are trying to do. So I'm going to start with a few basic principles of communication, which apply to anything: conversation, writing, making videos, whatever they may be. I'll give you a couple of examples, and then for the last part I'm going to have a look at giving presentations such as this, in schools, in workplaces, in community halls, whatever it might be. So first principle is keep educating yourself. The more you know, the more you're going to be, the more capable you're going to be able to explain things to people. The conversations have a tendency to take on a life of their own. They're inherently unpredictable, and so the more you know, the more tools you will have at your disposal to be able to adapt and to explain, to adapt to the changing circumstances of the conversation. Jargon masks ignorance. Do not try and blind people with lots of long, flashy words that you've learned. All this does is highlight your own ignorance, your own lack of profound understanding. If you cannot explain things in simple, everyday, accessible language, then you need to learn it more thoroughly yourself. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Second principle is to go one step at a time. If you just jump in and start saying to people, our entire system is a scam, you've been enslaved by a system that doesn't give a shit about you, your labour is stolen, you're forced to obey rules by a coercive system that has a monopoly on force, you're brainwashed by propaganda and advertising and media, wars are started for profit, our educational system deliberately dumbs us down, that tens of millions of people every year are killed through various forms of structural violence, that decisions are made, purely based on the needs of the 1% and with the needs of everyday people on the planet itself completely different. You start doing that, you're going to get one of two results. So you've got to start from a place of common experience, a place where you can agree on, and then go in small, manageable steps from there. For me, principle number 3 is the most important one, because that is the truly important question, is why do these things go on? People have to come to these understandings on their own. You can get them started on the road, but ultimately you have to get to a place where they are asking their own questions, trying to come to these conclusions on their own. At the moment, people simply don't ask themselves the right kinds of questions. They're not equipped to do so at school, and they are not given right information by our information sources in order to ask themselves the right kinds of questions. So it's up to us to build those bridges from their common ground, from things that we can all agree on, from everyday's common experience, everybody's common knowledge of things which are wrong with the world. Go from there, and then lead them to some of the more extreme things, some of the more radical ideas that we need them to talk about, we need them to understand. You can use various forms of media to start discussion. This is what I like to do when I'm sitting with someone, with a friend or an acquaintance, or I'm with a group of people that I maybe don't know particularly well. I like to start with an article or a video or something like, or maybe a song, something like that. So there are various forms of media available to us now. As was mentioned in the introduction, I myself write a blog. There's books, there's leaflets, there's slogans. This is my blog, liberatemankind.com. There's visual forms of communication. I'm going to show you one of my favourite little videos in just a second. And then there's spoken communication. What I'm focusing on today is these things in red here down at the bottom.
The world is coming to an end. The air is polluted, the ocean's contaminated. The animals are going extinct, the economy's collapsed. Education is shot, police are corrupt. Intelligence is shunned and ignorance rewarded. The people are depressed and angry. We can't live with each other and we can't live with ourselves, so everyone's medicated. We pass each other on the streets, and if we do speak, it's meaningless robotic communication. More people want 15 seconds of fame than a lifetime of meaning and purpose, because what's popular is more important than what's right. Ratings are more important than the truth. Our government builds twice as many prisons and schools. It's easier to find a Big Mac than an apple. And when you find the apple, it's been genetically processed and modified. Presidents lie, politicians trick us. Race is still an issue, so is religion. Your God doesn't exist, my God does, and he is all-loving. If you disagree with me, I'll kill you, or even worse, argue you to death. 92% of songs on the radio are about sex. Kids don't play tag, they play twerk videos. The average person watches 5 hours of television a day, and it's more violence on the screen than ever before. Technology has given us everything we could ever want, and at the same time stolen everything we really need. Pride is at an all-time high, humility an all-time low. Everybody knows everything, everybody's going somewhere, ignoring someone, blaming somebody. Not many human beings left anymore, a lot of human doings, plenty of human lingerings in the past, not many human beings. Money is still the root of all evil, yet we tell our kids, don't get that degree, the jobs don't pay enough. Good deeds are only done when there's a profit margin. Videos of the misfortunes of others go viral. We laugh and share them with our friends to laugh with us. Our role models today, 60 years ago, would have been examples of what not to be. There are states where people can legally be discriminated against because they were born a certain way. Companies invest millions of dollars hiring specialists to make little girls feel like they need makeup to be beautiful, permanently lowering their self-esteem because they will never be pretty enough to meet those impossible standards. Corporations tell us, buy, get this, get that. You must keep up, you must fit in. This will make you happy, but it never does for long. So what can we do in the face of all this madness and chaos? What is the solution? We can love. Not the love you hear in your favorite song on the radio. I mean real love, true love, boundless love. You can love each other from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed. Perform an act of kindness because that is contagious. We can be mindful during every interaction, planting seeds of goodness, showing a little more compassion than usual. We can forgive because 300 years from now, will that grudge you hold against your friend, your mother, your father have been worth it? Instead of trying to change others, we can change ourselves, we can change our hearts. We've been sold lies, brainwashed by our leaders and those we trust, and not recognize our brothers and sisters, and to exhibit anger, hatred, and cruelty. But once we truly love, we will meet anger with sympathy, hatred with compassion, cruelty with kindness. Love is the most powerful weapon on the face of the earth. Robert Kennedy once said that few will have the greatness to be in history, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events, and in the total of all those acts will be written the history of a generation. So yes, the world is coming to an end, and the path towards a new beginning starts within you.
Yeah, so I was talking about building bridges from... I was slightly dubious about playing that because it makes me cry more often than not when I watch that. I was talking about building bridges from everyday common experience and then taking them to slightly more extreme, slightly more radical places. I'd just like to go through a few possible examples of that. So he mentioned in their education, he does another video, Prince EA, by the way, his name is. He's done quite a few videos, they're really good. He does another one where he takes the educational system, he puts the educational system on trial. And that's one of the areas I think where we can really get people to question why are things as they are. You know, everybody knows that very, very highly prescriptive curricula, constant testing, league tables, all of this kind of thing is no way to run an educational system. So why then is our educational system exactly the same as it was 150 years ago? Why has it not been reformed in light of a changing modern world? You know, perhaps, maybe, the idea of our education system is indeed to deliberately stifle imagination and creativity in our young people, to get them to obey authority without question, and to do what their bosses tell them for the rest of their lives. Perhaps that's the real reason behind an education system. Everybody knows that the Iraq War was fought... Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Everybody knows that the Iraq War was entered into under false pretences with malice aforethought, and that it was started for no reason other than economic and political gain. And Tony Blair lied to Parliament, lied to the public. The Labour government at the time set up a sham inquiry in the form of the Hutton Report to exonerate itself, and he is a smug bastard, no two ways about it. Also,
education. That's what he said.
Education. Indoctrination. Sorry, what were you saying? Go on, say again. No. You said education. Then you said something after that. Which I didn't hear.
No, I'm just saying that. He was the same education.
Yeah. He was that guy. I mean, listen, it wasn't all bad, that Labour government, right? They did spend a lot more money on some of the things which we actually need in society, but nevertheless, he is a smug bastard. Also, the Iraq War, the fact that essentially a false story was created in order to take us to war. You know, you can get people to look at other wars. How were those entered into? The sinking of the Lusitania, the attack on Pearl Harbor, the USS Maine bombing was used to start a war with Spain. That's going back a couple of hundred years now. The Gulf of Tonkin incident that was used to start the war on Pearl Harbor. 9/11, which started the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, all of these things were lies told by government, usually the US government, to the public in order to start war. Why? That's the question, right? We all know. Why do you have to get people out there asking these kinds of questions of themselves? Right, divide and conquer. We all know that divide and conquer has been used to rule empires for centuries. You divide the population, you set them against themselves, you create false divisions in their society, and then they squabble amongst themselves rather than unite to overthrow their oppressors. So, get people to see how, in today's world, religious and political affiliations, how states and ethnicities, how even which bloody football team you support, are used to divide us, set us against each other, keep us arguing, keep us squabbling, prevent unity. Get people to think about how every single issue in our society, every single political issue, every single debate is a confrontational one. Yeah, you have this. Oh, sorry, I'm out of camera range, aren't I? You have this combative kind of way of solving any problems, rather than starting on common ground and then seeing what we can agree on. We start with these adversarial conditions. We have one camp set against another camp. One ends up winning, one ends up losing. One ends up being right, one ends up being wrong. You know, our whole system of organisation operates on this principle. We all know that we live an entirely wasteful and wholly unsustainable way. Very many people are aware of this now. Disposability of products, obsolescence of products are everywhere that you look. People don't expect to have a phone for more than a year. People don't expect to have a car for more than 5 years, you know. This is nuts. It's an unbelievable waste of resources. Our wholly unnecessary reliance on fossil fuels continues relatively unabated, despite the fact technologies for alternatives have existed since as far back as, get this, hydrogen fuel cell. Anyone know when the hydrogen fuel cell was invented? 1834. You know what I mean? So technologies have been around. Yeah, I know, I couldn't believe it either. So yeah, I mean, the technology's been around for a very long time. So again, I come back to why. Why have these technologies not taken over? Why are we still using oil? Consumerism is running rampant and is rewarded and encouraged at every single turn. People who have more have greater status in our society. We're constantly bombarded with advertisements and other encouragements, other inducements, cheap credit, etc. to continue to buy things that we don't need. And the consequences of this are there for all to see in ever diminishing fresh water supplies, ever increasing pollution of soil. Climate change is right here. We're already getting more frequent and more extreme weather events. You know, it is already happening. So given the dire consequences of ignoring the warnings that are before us and carrying on as we were, why are we ignoring the warnings that are in front of us and carrying on exactly as we always have done? Why? I repeat, why is the important question. So try and get people to keep coming back to the why. Never underestimate the importance or the value of a conversation had with a stranger in a pub or showing a video to some colleagues at work. These little things, however small they may be, each of these things are planting seeds in minds, and each and every one of these seeds has the potential to grow into an awakened mind, which can then go and plant its own seeds, and so on and so on. Right, I'm going to move on now to presentations, and I'm taking as my main source of advice this chap here, Simon Sinek, who is the third most watched TED talker on YouTube. He is, by his own admission, I've seen an interview with him, he's by his own admission painfully shy and finds speaking to crowds of people utterly uncomfortable. And yet, as I said, he's the third most watched TED talker on YouTube. So he's managed to come up with methods which he uses in his own talks which allow him to overcome his sense of nerves and shyness. It is nerve-wracking standing up here. I must admit I'm not finding it all that much, but then I am a teacher, you know what I mean? So I'm regularly used to standing up in front of classes of 30 kids or whatever and teaching, so I probably find it less nerve-wracking than someone who wouldn't have that kind of experience. But yeah, as I say, I'm going to use his top 7 tips and a few embellishments that I've put on myself and got and tips that I've had from other TED talkers. So, tip number 1 is don't talk straight away. When you come up on stage, get to your podium, put your notes down, survey the room, take a breath. The audience will get from this the sense that you don't feel the need to rush, and this lends you an air of assuredness and certainty in what you're doing. I've just done the second one on here, the 10-second pause, and I have to say it was agonising. I don't think I did as long as 10 seconds. It feels unnaturally long. The idea behind the 10-second pause is that if you use that once, maybe twice, in the body of your talk, what it does is it regathers the attention of the room before you move on to a new theme or a new section, something like that. I can't remember what the name of the person was that offered this piece of advice. What they were saying was that even people who've lost their attention and are sitting there texting on their phone, a pause that long will make them look up. Hey, what's going on? Will make them look up, and you regather the attention of even those that you might have lost. Tip number 2, and I think this is the most important one, is be there to give and not to take. And so there are various ways that you can do this. A taker is someone that the audience perceives as being there to sell them something or recruit them to something or trying to convince them of something, right? This is what a taker is. A giver doesn't do that. A giver inspires trust in their audience, and therefore the audience rewards them willingly with their attention, right? So you need to try and be a giver. There are various ways of accomplishing this. First one is to open up. Be emotionally available to them. You know, tell them things about you. Be personal with them. Give them a, wow, really? That kind of thing. You know, if you can give them a moment like that, a fact or a story that they might never have heard before, which has an impact on them. Next thing is questions. If you are lucky enough to get a question from your audience, treat it as a blessing. If you get a question, what it means is they're paying attention and they're interested in what you're saying, right? So do not ignore questions. Ideally, repeat them for the rest of the room in case everybody hasn't heard it. Deal with it straight away if you can. If you're going to come onto it, if you're going to come onto the content of the question shortly, then, do you know what? I'm going to get to that in just a minute. If you wouldn't mind waiting 2 minutes, I'm going to cover exactly that, right? So you're not... But if you fob off the question, or if you, even worse, ignore it altogether, you are likely to alienate certainly that person and quite possibly the rest of your audience at the same time. If it means you have to rejig your order a little bit in your presentation, then so be it. You should be well enough prepared that you can make those kinds of adjustments on your feet. Next one is don't overrun. Remember, the audience has given you their time, right? This is another gift. This is a blessing from them, so don't abuse it. I'm hoping to finish bang on, but it's 24 minutes plus the video, so I should finish bang on, but anyway, we'll see. And finally, and I've kind of alluded to this throughout, be grateful, especially if they applaud you at the end, or as indeed has happened partway through today, which has been lovely. Yeah, so again, appreciate they're giving you their time, they're giving you their applause, they're giving you their love. Be grateful for that, and if you can communicate that in your tone and in your body language, so much the better. I've talked for so long, this thing's gone off, there we go. Right, next one, eye contact. Every single person that I've seen says scan and pan is bad. Just looking randomly around the room, not stopping on any particular person is bad. Actually, it disconnects you. It looks like you're trying to connect with the audience, but actually it disconnects you. And so, the best way is to go around a room and make individual eye contact with somebody, move on to somebody else, and so on around the room. Finish a sentence with one person and then move on to another one. This creates intimacy between you and your audience, and your talk will have a more conversational feel. Rather than a lecture, it will feel a little bit more like a conversation, albeit a somewhat one-sided one. Tip number 4, I'm somewhat guilty of not doing this. I talk very quickly in my natural state anyway, and so I have to deliberately slow myself down. This is me talking slowly, believe it or not. If you're nervous, you will tend to rush, and so you need to make deliberate efforts to pause at the end of each sentence, even in the middle of a sentence. You really can't go too slowly. Remember, your audience wants you to succeed. They don't want to sit there feeling awkward that you're not succeeding. They want you to succeed, and so they will hang on your every word. One of the other speakers, was it Kyle, alluded to this, that violent language? I can't remember. One of the other speakers alluded to this idea of violent language. And yeah, this is a very important one. This is another one that I tend to be guilty of. I use phrases like raping the planet and enslaving mankind and mass murder and stuff like that. And, this is very dramatic, and writing, it's fine. You can make a point and you can make it strongly, and it can be quite dramatic and quite fun to read. But if you use this kind of language in conversation with people, it kind of constitutes a form of verbal assault from which people feel they need to protect themselves, right? And so now the content of what you're saying is not getting in because of the way you're saying it, right? So you need to really try and be gentle with your use of language. By starting on common ground and going gently, step by step by step, you invite agreement at every stage, and you retain attentiveness for the next step, if you see what I mean. This is one that, again, I came across in more than one place, turn nerves into excitement. Again, when you're standing up here, you will experience the symptoms of nervousness. Clammy hands, shakes, wobbly knees, that kind of thing, elevated heart rate, that kind of stuff. So, if you're prepared thoroughly, you've really got nothing to be nervous about. I've brought notes up with me just in case I get lost. I've got a little prompt. I've had this happen to me at Speaker's Corner. I'm standing there, and all of a sudden I just lose my thread, my mind goes blank, and what are you going to do? So you need to have something that you can just give yourself a little kickstart. But if you've got that, if you're properly prepared, then you can just stand up here and enjoy the fact that you've got the adrenaline coursing around your body, your senses are heightened, you're a little bit more perky than you usually are. You can just relax and enjoy the sensation. And then the 7th and final tip is visual aids and notes. Fun, I don't just want to read this out to you because that's one of the points. But they want to enhance what you're saying, but without distracting the audience from what you're saying. So, some kind of image, or maybe a bit of additional information, but it's generally speaking a bad idea to read your slides out. The audience can read for themselves, and it means that you're now not connecting with your audience. If you're standing there reading the slide out, you're not connecting with your audience as you should be. Final thing is, as I've already mentioned very briefly, is text notes. I would recommend very strongly you don't have a full script with you when you read the script for exactly the same reason. You're just going to stand there, read the script, you'll lose any natural intonation and sense of drama, and you will not be making sufficient eye contact with your audience. So sufficient prompts that if you get stuck somewhere you can remind yourself, but practice, prepare thoroughly, and you should be good to go. If I can just leave you with one final thought. Again, this touches on things that others have already said. But, sorry, I forgot about the summary page. But yeah, just very quickly summarising the things that I said. Number one, educate yourself. You can't possibly educate others if you are yourself not thoroughly educated. So get online, watch videos, read blogs, whatever. Start from common ground, one step at a time from there, small steps. Try and get to the why that underline these things. Listen to people, be ready to answer their questions, and finally, be gentle. This could be their first time, right? And if I could just leave you with one final thought. Don't be discouraged if your words seem to initially fall on deaf ears, is what the last bit's supposed to say. That's all. Thank you very much for listening. I really enjoyed it. Oh, there it is. There it is. Thank you. Thank you.
Keep the applause going. Come on. Thank you very much, Eric.